Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you, everyone that could join us tonight. We really appreciate everyone coming to find out additional information regarding the Lake Point Incorporation feasibility study, the vote, exactly what we're voting on, and also any additional questions and answers that people may have regarding the election this year or the incorporation effort. We're going to start by going through the feasibility study, touching on key points. We're going to do questions at towards the end. Please submit all your questions in the chat group so we can make sure we don't miss anything. We'll make sure we answer those as soon as we get through the information. But we'll start with the feasibility study, then we'll move on to the forms of government we're voting on and various parts about the vote, and then answer questions for anyone that's put them in the chat. Again, we thank you for all coming today, and we're going to get started. So the feasibility study, actually the financial study, ended in March of 2021. The reason we bring that up is it's important to note that additional revenues have been made in Lake Point, additional approved commercial areas, including one I was notified about today. There's a coffee shop being built in Lake Point that we just got notified about, and additional tax and other revenues have happened also. So obviously the study ending that soon doesn't have all the data that they could have collected at the time, but it started about 2 years ago, and the process to petition for incorporation, draw boundaries, and everything is a multi-year process. This study by law is done by an outside party so that it is not biased from the county that we're incorporating away from, or from the parties that are seeking incorporation or the petitioners of incorporation. So it was done by Zion's Public Finance, and by law, under the 10205A code of the state code, it has to meet the standard of our current existing services. So the financials that are presented equal the current services we're experiencing from the county. They can't do anything less. They have to make sure it meets or exceeds the current services that we have. So I'm going to just scroll pages here, and we'll look, see, and answer all the questions once we get through this. On the first page here that we highlighted, this is the executive summary of the study. Basically, the key points to this are that it says if we became a city, we wouldn't have any additional tax burden. We also would have an average ratio of expenses of 107%. That means that the cost to run the city would be less than the income we have coming in for the city. We'll have, on average, 7% more income for our city than we would to run the city. One thing I wanted to point out, just for reference, the current year was the existing year that ended in March of 2021. Now, as we enter 2022, that's year one, and 2023 is year two. When we become a city, if we vote yes to incorporation this year, then we would next year have an election for elected officials in Lake Point. So our official start date for our city would be in 2023. And at that point, we'd have $50,000, almost, approximately, $49,383 in excess revenue on top of the costs it would be to run the city to keep our existing services. Again, we just wanted to highlight throughout the study, they put out there there'll be no additional tax burden to any of our property owners. As you can see all across here, they talk about the county funds that will come back to us, and then say these tax impacts won't affect Lake Point because we'd no longer be unincorporated. Moving down into population density, if community members weren't aware, this was based off the 2019 census block, not the 2020. So we have more population than this also at the current time, but that equals additional revenues being allocated to us by the state because our population has grown. This study also is posted on the social media pages on our Incorporate Lake Point page for Facebook, and we can email it to anyone that needs it, a copy of it. Talking about the population size, within the square mileage of the boundaries, we have a lot of commercial area and a lot of people. It equals to a large population in that area that is served by the money that we would bring back from Tooele County. Jumping ahead here, talks about the medium income. If people are interested in this, it basically equates to Lake Point is a wealthy city based on our residents, based on our commercial areas. We have currently 25 parcels in the study that ended in March that are commercial, built and operating. We actually have additional ones that weren't accounted for in the study. Chris Robinson zoned an entire new commercial area by the roundabouts over on the north end of Saddleback. Those weren't included in the study because the rezone wasn't official at the time the study was completed. And as I mentioned, just today, the permit was approved for a new coffee shop that's also being in Lake Point and some other commercial properties. Based on the boundary, there are 50% of all of our land that's still vacant, unbuilt on. There is lots of room for commercial growth, additional revenues for our city within our existing boundary. And they highlighted that just to make sure people are aware that we're not capped off or limited to the revenue our city will get if we incorporate. So this goes over a breakdown when you read the full study of administrative costs. There's several administrative positions that have to be budgeted for on a county or a city level. This can be done for hiring them directly through our city, or it can be done by contracting these positions out. This section just talks about what's allocated for startup expenses so that all expenses are covered in the budget, which is still fiscally more revenue, more income than the cost to start up, than the cost to have expenses running the city. Cost about planning and zoning and engineering and building inspections. That's probably one of our second highest cost items, but it's a cost offset, it's a wash. Essentially, it's a pass-through financial that we bring in money for these items as someone pays for permits and fees, and then we just pay it out to our engineers, our inspectors, and our planning and zoning group to take care of any kind of building or development. But this does allocate money to all of those things. People have asked before if we have to have a building, a community building, a town hall or anything. We do not. Right here, it's not highlighted, but it is not required that we build a city hall. They allocated $15,000 per year, $1,250 a month, assumes rental of facility. At first, you would think that might be too low, but if you equate that the council doesn't meet in a building in a public forum every single day of every part of the month, it's easy to get that money and to be able to get a building rented or a location rented for the community meetings. It also sets us aside additional money. There's options of lots of options to do this. Sorry. There's lots of options to rent facilities, do things out of homes during non-public meetings, things like that. There's just no requirement that we have to have a building, but I can say from being on the Lake Point Park Board, we just rented a facility for our park board meetings. It only cost us $50 to use it for our annual park or monthly park board meetings. So there is plenty of money to do the community meetings we need to have. The public safety cost. Law enforcement is probably the #1 cost we're going to expense in becoming a city. These comparative financials are based on the same equivalent services we have now. So it equated to getting a quote of the cost of services from the county sheriff and what it would cost us to keep our same services we have now from the sheriff's office. And that's what's highlighted here. You can see how we're lower than most of these areas that have been highlighted that are municipal incorporated cities. There are several options for law enforcement. It's never recommended to do your own full-fledged police department. They even cover that in most of the studies, usually, that says don't do that. That's a large startup cost. This equates to contracting with the sheriff's office. But since this study's been completed, Grantsville has reached out also and talked about a pooled contract with Erda City, because Erda became a city and that's who has bid to contract for Erda. And there's lots of other additional resources and abilities to contract for law enforcement. But that will be the most cost expense thing for our city. I see there's a few questions. We will get to those for sure and be able to answer all those without issue and without concern. Thank you for submitting questions in the chat group. Here's where it indicates that all services must be on the same level that we receive now. This next section talks about the county road fund and how those funds would shift to Lake Point City, where we could then contract the county for road services or other road repair groups, road construction groups, and gives us the option to negotiate and contract for services for pothole repair, road repair. The budget set by road, centerline road miles paved, or weighted road miles is what they call it. We have several roads touching Lake Point that are state roads. We have additional county roads on the outside of the boundaries that are going to be maintained and taken care of by the county, but everything within the boundaries, according to what has been submitted as a non-binding quote, the county roads department indicated they could provide all the same support, which included snow removal, road repairs, street signs, any kind of damage, all the same duties. And that's what this highlights here. It highlighted that during the study, they confirmed that most of the roads in Lake Point are in fair to good condition. This does not account for potholes. It just accounts for the life of the road and the most recent overlays we just had in some of the areas for the roads. Again, like I said, they proposed that they would take our money and our funds that come to us now, and they'd be contracted with us, but there's several options we'll have as a city. This chart down here also shows again that the cost for Lake Point to manage their roads in comparable cities are really low compared to the cities based on the roads within the boundary area. Just wanted to make sure we highlighted that there is taxes that we will still not be responsible for as a city, because we already pay those taxes regardless if we are a city or if we're with the county. Some of those are the parks and recreation, the cemetery, the mosquito abatement, school district. All those would still be paid by every county resident, regardless of municipality or county unincorporated. This part, they highlighted that the city has no outstanding debt, which they would be responsible for if incorporation occurs. So there would be no debt once we start as a city. The next breakdown is just a projection of actual positions, including legal for starting up writing ordinances, a mayor and council, or mayor or council, depending on which form of government we elect. Other costs, such as the building officials and engineering and everything that are pass-through costs. Election costs on our first year as a city, that wouldn't be in effect until the first year after we're a city, after we have our own elected officials. Public safety, dispatching, roads and highways. So if you look at year 2 again, our total expenses are 1.2 million approximately. And then again, it highlights that if incorporation occurs, Lake Point, again, the city itself will not be responsible for fire districts, cemetery, and other things like sewer utilities that most cities would be required. Those are their own districts that we are all taxed already from. Going into the projections of revenue, it talks in detail about what we pay to the county. This is the assessment of our total paid to the county. Several of these are going to be paid whether we're a city or not. But one of the things that currently goes to the county for money that's actually being spent in Lake Point but on a county level, it's divided out amongst the county for county services, is a 2019 record. Again, we're in 2021, so there's additional information and revenues of $118,450 in the boundary area. And that we'd receive additional amounts for what they call sales that are tracked by the Utah State Tax Commission, but they're not specifically located until we become a city. Once we're a newly formed city, they estimate an additional $50,000 to $100,000 from additional sales and taxes that aren't tracked within our boundaries at the current time. Those also are not included in the budgets because that was not a number they had. They couldn't include it as projected revenue. Currently, the per capita or per person distribution in Lake Point was based on the 2,599 people. That number has grown. We currently would get $304,600 back from this per capita investment. Additional revenue sources that could be occurring in the future include municipal energy tax revenues. It's only eligible to cities. It's not one that they would have to be elected and chosen by the vote of our public, and something in the future if the city wanted to do, but it is an additional revenue. Motor vehicle registrations, those already come currently to 2 tax districts, the Park District and the Sewer District. If we become a city, the city would also get a distribution of that money for motor vehicle registrations. Then business licensing fees and permits based on only the 25 businesses, which does not include home businesses that have to operate. There's an allocation also for that. So there is additional revenues that are not accounted for in this system, in this revenue projections, that also could bring in additional revenue and income for our city. Again, like we were talking, building permits and everything, they're just offset with the inspections, offset with the engineering. So that cost would be something we would collect on behalf of the city for any building and engineering, but then we would turn around and pay that to our contracted inspectors, our contracted engineers, our various jobs like that. So here it talks about, again, the weighted mile per road mile distribution. Each area, so on the current level, the county gets distributed this money on behalf of Lake Point residents, Stansbury, and other residents. This information is that we would get a total of $161,233 allocated directly back to Lake Point. Right now, it's being allocated to the county and distributed among all county services for all unincorporated county areas. Then it just talks about, again, charging fees for services that would offset the costs for inspections, zoning, and engineering. So as we look at year 2, because that would be the year we would start, and that would be our budget year based on electing to incorporate this year and then electing our elected officials next year. Year 2 would be the year we'd start. As we go down, it shows total revenue of $1,2,665,080. So more revenue, more income than the cost to run the city. So the only risk they identified was that economic downturn in cycles can happen. That happens with every government, county or otherwise. So it could happen to the county also. Taxes could change at the county. They have raised taxes several times over the last few years. So one of the things the incorporation sponsors all agree on, that it's better to keep the money being spent in Lake Point and turn it back in and invest in our community with the growth in the building. But it does indicate we have a large, good tax base compared to other cities. The other opportunities that have come up, these were unique ones identified: sanitation collection, the ability to contract for sanitation, to get better contractors, to possibly reduce costs also, because we're currently paying more than other cities, incorporated cities, and the ability to bring in other type things. As we talked with the person that did the feasibility study, she said your cost could go down if you contract just for garbage, or you could go back to the same cost you're paying now and maybe obtain recycling services. So she pointed out a variety of things, but she did want to highlight that we'll have the ability to contract for garbage services. They continue to hit on sales tax revenues because it's something that can't be allocated correctly right now, because until we are a city, that is not put into our budget. It's pulled in one big budget at the county level. They also highlighted additional forms of revenue or annexation of potential areas in Lake Point if we become a city. The commercial development, as we said in the beginning, there's 50% of the land that is undeveloped. So commercial develop with our growth, we'll be able to attract more commercial growth on Highway 36. In addition to becoming a city, we'll be eligible to be on certain boards and committees. Right now, our representatives are one county official on the economic development and tourism, and a Grantsville city representative and a Tooele city representative. There are several boards regarding economic development, tourism, and other things that only members of the city government can be on with the county. She also highlights the number one reason people incorporate in Utah is local representation. The ability to have your own representatives who live where you live, with seats at the table on those boards, with seats at the table invested in your community, and negotiating on behalf of Lake Point for anything that's going to occur. She also highlighted that we can get grants that we're not eligible for on a county level. We could get direct grants for Lake Point City and also help with needs. Again, she talks about additional revenues that are not allocated in this study, that are impact fees charged to builders and developers for services, grants, again, talking about grants, and various other things that we cannot get as being unincorporated area. Those are allocated and only eligible for the county and are distributed countywide. This here also talks about that revenues do not fall short in the projected 5 years required. So they project out 5 years and make sure that we will not have any issues where we have to disincorporate or have any budgetary issues if we have economic downturn. This law changed on the state level, where incorporations used to be done by the county level and the studies were ordered by the county. The state took it so that it would prevent biasm by both the petitioners and the county level. But what happened is Ophir disincorporated a few years after incorporating because they didn't have the money they needed. So they changed the state law requiring that revenues must meet a certain threshold over the 100% to prevent further issues like that in the future. Again, she talks about in this that because Lake Point is a separate tax district for fire parks, sewer, mosquitoes, and schools, we will not have any additional taxes for these entities if incorporation occurs, because we already pay those regardless whether we are a city or unincorporated county. Everyone also pays the general fund. That's for countywide services. That's whether we're a city or unincorporated, but that's for countywide services such as Tooele County Health Department. Everyone pays into that. That's a good example of one that no matter what, Grantsville, Lake Point City, if they're a city, Stockton, Tooele, unincorporated, all pay countywide services for the general fund. And then she does highlight that here on road funds, again, that, so one of the highlights on most of the pages we're on now are that if we incorporate, it does impact the Tooele County budget. State law makes them identify that, how much Tooele County would be impacted. So that's what this is talking about. It'll impact two funds of Tooele County that they'll have to offset their budget if we choose to incorporate, but it will not impact Lake Point if we choose to incorporate. The reason that is important is because if you're aware, Erta City incorporated last year, and this year they vote on their elected officials. To offset their budget, it has been recommended for all of us unincorporated still remaining that we have $86 added again to our taxes and a tax increase to offset that cost. So there's a potential of another tax increase coming from Tooele County to offset the costs for Erta City being incorporated. So they highlight that in the study because of state law. Again, here's it talks about the revenues that would come back from Tooele County and be invested solely in Lake Point. Property tax revenue that exists, it would go to the newly formed or to Lake Point City, and then sales tax revenue would also come back to Lake Point. So as we've tried to make sure everyone's aware, there's several things that the sponsors were excited to see. One, it really comes down to what people want. Do they want the money being spent and exhausted in Lake Point, put back into Lake Point as the growth and development comes, as the commercial comes? We want that money here where it's impacting us the most. So the highlight how much will come back to Lake Point on property taxes and sales tax revenue if we incorporate. And then the anticipated 118,000 for point of sale revenues that can't be allocated until they know exactly when we're a city how much we'll get. Additionally, there's other revenue sources like payment in lieu of taxes. That's 36,000 revenues from the source. All that's from the municipal services fund tax rate going away if we incorporate and us becoming a city. So the total allocation we would get back from money currently being paid to Tooele County at a Lake Point is estimated at $922,418 of money that would come back to Lake Point and be invested back in Lake Point into our local government and local elected officials, and allow us all to have more of a say and more of an impact on what's going on in our community. And then let me see if there's any questions real quick about this study.
Ryan, are you taking comments in the chat section or open mic?
Yeah, in chat. Just so we don't.
On a tablet, and I'm not very proficient at typing on a tablet.
Okay, let me get through some of these, and then if we don't have a lot in here, we'll. Okay. All right. So let's quickly go over. Let me stop sharing this screen. Sorry, just a sec to pull up this other stuff. Okay, the first question in the chat is about boundaries. So this is the current boundary for Lake Point City. Up here in the top, this is by Lake Point Junction, right as you come off of 201 and where 201 and I-80 connect. There is a commercial business here that requested to be part of Lake Point City. They are a fabricator of items, and there are three brothers that own a business who are getting ready to retire, and they are selling their business to develop that area, but they did request to be part of Lake Point City. So that's this part up here, because they're going to have a large commercial / residential development in the future years to come, but they're currently operating their business until that's occurred. As you go down here, all of this area was included. One of the thought processes of including this area is, as we all know, we need a road in and out of Tooele County to help with traffic. One of the things that the boards were not on, not being part of the boards or a city, is the Tooele Valley Transportation Planning Board. The representatives are Tooele City, Grantsville City, and Tooele County. They're elected officials from those areas. This area was included because, as we know, they want to put the Ochre Expressway through there. There's 4 options for roadways that, as we were working on incorporation, as we saw surveys, it was clear that the community wanted different options considered, but we didn't have a seat at the table. So right here is property owners who signed in and property that was included so that Lake Point City could have a say on future roads and what occurs in the boundaries. As we move down, this is 36 here. This is all the commercial development area that was included, and all of this area is residential area zoned R1 at the current time. The question was, go to the top question, sorry. Okay, question is, the Rio Tinto property is not currently in the Lake Point city boundaries. If we vote to incorporate, how can we limit or have a say in what Rio Tinto's future development is? So no, it's not currently included in the boundaries. Under state law, during incorporation, property has to be contiguous. Down here, south of it, we had 13 property owners sign in, but our surveyor and the state found a 45-foot piece of dirt that was owned by Kennecott or Rio Tinto that they were allowed to exclude their property because anyone over 10% of the property in the boundary can exclude their property from an incorporation. Our committee has had several meetings with Rio Tinto. We've met with them several times and we've discussed possibilities of annexation. And we hope that that is a future reality. And to answer, how can we limit or have a say in what Rio Tinto future development does? How I can express is that by having our own elected officials to represent us and represent town will provide us a benefit regarding what connects to services through our town, what connects to roads through our town, and what opportunities we have to work with these developers to try and get the best outcomes for parks, open space, and commercial development and more open residential properties as they move in their development. I hope everyone that's answered. Okay. Now we do believe that there'll be areas annexed in because a lot of their property up here and down here is within Lake Point City proper that the county records have. And there is future opportunities based on our meetings with them. So then to jump really quick to next question. Next question is, how will Lake Point be able to compete with larger cities and more financial resources to get qualified employees, city planners, managers, etc.? That's a great question. I can first answer that even to a county of its size, they do contract for engineering services. So they don't have on-site engineers. They're just contracting for ones that are not living here in our county. The county itself contracts us for various services. So we'll be able to find someone to contract with. We're confident of that. Plus we have been pulling residents in the community. We have available planners, surveyors. We have a lot of resources that live right here in Lake Point. In fact, our map and boundaries were done by a surveyor that lives in Lake Point. We donated his time to survey out these boundaries for us. So we should be able to track the contracts and the services we need for these positions, whether it's with Tooele County, contracting back with them, or contracting with other companies that do surveying, engineering, and planning. So the next question while we're on boundaries is, being sandwiched between I-80 and Chris Robinson's land that's not included in the boundary, we will bear the brunt of their traffic coming through our roads with none of them as a tax base to fund road maintenance. During morning commutes, Center Street is a parking lot. What will be done to mitigate this? So all of Chris Robinson's property on 36, which is here, is all included. The only parts that were left out are these salt ponds and things that had only agricultural greenbelt tax value, no commercial value. All this also is Chris Robinson's property in various parts all along 36. Commercial tax base by the first roundabout here.
I was talking about the railroad tracks.
Up here?
Yep.
Okay, that's a good question. So the all of this right here is Kennecott. As you go down here, this is BLM. Chris Robinson's property starts right about here behind phase 2 of Saddleback and then doesn't go, and it's all right here mixed with BLM. So it's the furthest south property Chris met with most of our sponsors and made clear to us that he would annex his property in. He even put it in writing for us, but he wanted to wait until we're a city when we had established services up and running. We don't know what that means, but he did tell us in writing that he would do it once we had city services up and running. If you look at the boundary, you can't see past this map, but there is only about 2 miles between us and the Erdis city boundary. And in between there is BLM and Chris Robinson's land. So it's a future that we won't know. Only our elected officials will, and our community to have a say once we're around city. But I would say absolutely that any impact on anything that comes through the city when we're a city, even if it's up here, is going to have to connect through the city. That does allow our city to work with Chris Robinson and to negotiate impacts and negotiate road maintenance and costs and various things like that, and to mitigate the impacts. Excellent question. Another question on density of Adobe Rock and Lake Point. One thing to make clear is our goal is to benefit the city and everything that happens. By doing so, by having incorporated city and Lake Point elected officials representing us, one of the key things, for an example, is each county representative represents 15,000 people. If you take the study numbers that we only have 2,599 people in Lake Point, and our elected official is elected out of Stansbury, representing about 12,000 people over there, we only have one person representing Lake Point's interests. When we have our own elected council, we will have 5 people representing the interests of Lake Point. One thing that all builders, all developers, whether in the boundaries of Lake Point or not, will have to do is work with the city when they connect to a road, when they connect through something that will impact the city. Let me quickly pull up another page really quick. Okay, so Utah state law changed on 5/5/2021. There'd been so many impacts to various cities and various things that they decided to change a bit of the law. This particular section that I'm going to share with you, it's just a reference to code so that everyone's aware that other entities are required to conform to the municipality's land use ordinances. The exception is always going to be school districts, but what it means is that if we have ordinances that exist within our municipality when we are a city, and we have an outside boundary developer coming in to connect to something that we have required or something in our property, we will have the ability to make sure they conform to our ordinances and our incorporated needs. We will have, I guess I'd call it negotiating power, to try and work with them and to mitigate impacts and to try and get the best we can for Lake Point City out of what is occurring. And then as a clarity, one thing to note is that the Saddleback Development Agreement is a county development agreement, not a municipal development agreement. So that agreement's with the county. Now, Chris Robinson did sign his property in, so he understands that we're going to be a city, but his agreement is with the county, not with our city. Okay, let me stop sharing again. Okay. Just going to go to some more questions since we're on boundaries. Sorry. One of the things to note that someone's pointed out separately before this meeting is having more of a say in the roads behind us. Our goal as a community is preserve the foothills. One thing when we bring up Chris Robinson's development is that he set aside nearly 900 acres of open space east of the railroad tracks called the Green Ravine. One of the reasons why we're so adamant about having that part of it, our boundaries, and having elected officials to try and protect that area for us is because of the Ochre Expressway. There's 4 options that have been proposed. We're wanting to have the other options that don't affect our open space. There's definitely a good number of reasons to incorporate, as someone pointed out in the chat. Cons, okay, sorry, Jonathan Gerard. Jonathan Gerard just wants to make sure that we're clear that the tax that's taken from Tooele County or from Murda City will only increase the taxes assessed to those in unincorporated areas, not the entire county. That's correct. So when Murda City finishes starting their city up and the county has to offset that budget, they'll increase taxes on the unincorporated residents. They won't have to if they cut budget and cut positions or things like that. But it's a good question to make sure we're clear on that. That only applies to unincorporated areas. Another question, do the proposed boundaries match other service districts like Cemetery and Parks and Lake Point Improvement District? They currently do not. There is 3 different boundaries. The tax district for the Lake Point Cemetery and Parks includes a lot of the Rio Tinto land. The Lake Point Sewer District includes Lake Point proper because they service all residents. That's a good question. Annexation will allow for expansion to shore up the boundaries to match the same areas. A comment from Dan. I don't see any cons this time around. I was one of the sponsors for Lake Point feasibility study 5 or 6 years ago. We lacked on roads, people, and population. Financials were not good. We voted no last time around. I totally regret that decision since then. The minute we voted to not incorporate, Lake Point received 2 tax increases and the Rio Tinto development agreement occurred. I would beg to say that almost everyone voted no last time. Totally regret that decision. The current feasibility study is a way better for our financials. It's our time to incorporate. It's our time. If we don't do it now, we'll regret it. Just reading comments. I grew up in Magna, non-incorporated. We never got anything besides crumbs from the county. I love Magna, but I don't want to be Magna. Lake Point is incredible with amazing people. It's time to incorporate. Jim has a question. What is the difference of this election and the one 5 years ago that failed? 5 years ago, the incorporation election lost by 6 votes. 5 years ago, the feasibility study projected tax increases on the community on the second year. The major difference this time is there'll be no tax increases. We have a larger commercial base. Since the last one, Arby's and other businesses have been built out on 36, other commercial areas rezoned, and other things like that. That's a good question. Just looking at the last ones here. Okay, what I want to go into now, if there's no more questions right now, is talk about what we're actually voting on. Let me share that with you real quick. Okay, this is the ballot everyone will receive. There should be 1 ballot per registered voter, not per home. Anyone living within the boundaries that's a registered voter will get a ballot to vote on it. Ballots started arriving yesterday on the 12th and should be here no later than Monday. If you haven't got it, contact the Tooele County Clerk, Tracy Shaw, and ask what's going on with your ballot. Make sure your addresses are right, everything like that. Tracy's done a wonderful job trying to get this on this year's ballot. She's worked hard to try and adjust with changes and things she wasn't aware of, being a newly appointed clerk. And she'll help you out if you don't have a ballot. So the first question we're going to vote on is whether we want to incorporate as a city. That's simply yes or no. Question number 2 you'll see is what kind of government we will want as a city. One of the key things on this ballot is we want to select something from each of the 3 questions. There's pros and cons to each of the forms of government. We can talk about some of those really quick. I've got another document regarding state law, but let me briefly summarize. A 5-member council form means all 5 members are equivalent in position. They all have the same voting rights. They can't override or veto each other. Same with the 6-member council form. They also operate with one of them acting as a mayor. They choose that as a council. One acts as the mayor. The mayor does all the, I guess, public facing stuff for the city, but they have equal authority. The mayor can't override the council on their decisions and legislative affairs, and they're all elected equally. The 5-member council mayor form and 7-member council mayor form. This is where a mayor is elected separately as a separate elected official whose administrative function only. The council would be the legislative body. The mayor would be the administrative body. This one also increases the cost for Lake Point City by having the mayor operating it as additional position to pay if they elect to take pay as elected officials. Another option that's not listed here, but is an option that could occur, is a council mayor form with a city manager. Again, a city manager is another form of a position that is non-elected. There would be a paid government position for Lake Point City, so it costs the city additional money, but it is a position that would be non-elected would be appointed, and that position would be appointed by the mayor. So those are the types of government that we would vote on. We'll come back to some quick details on that really quick. And then the third question is if we have districts, whether we want those districts to be, if we vote, whether we want to have council members elected by district. So a district is a population, meaning number of residents, drawn boundary, divided equally to try and get, for instance, the 2,599 would be cut in 5 parts, equal population, 6 parts, or 7 parts, equal population. And that would be how a district would be elected official. Let me change to the other document real quick. Okay, this just quickly, we'll go over some highlights. We just talked about it. It's all set and established by law, what we're voting on, but let me jump down to a 6-member council. Like we said, all 6 are equal. One of them is representing as mayor. They all have equal vote. It's the same for 6 and 5-member. Ceremonial functions will be done by the mayor for the city, but they cannot veto an ordinance, override anything by the council. So it's equal representation across the board. They can appoint a administrator if they want, but that's also a decision of the council because they're all equal across the board. Just again, it highlights it the same thing for the 5-member council. Then we go down to the council mayor form of government. They're a separate elected official. So they can appoint a city manager, hire a city manager. They only answer to the electorate and themselves. They are not equal with the council. So their administrative decisions regarding development, community affairs, all that, anything non-legislative with a mayor would run through them. So we'll be voting on all 3 of those things. Let me see that we have a few chat comments. Okay. Our committee would love to, get feedback or comments on the election by districts, because boundaries, like I said, are drawn. Scott Jacobs has a good question. If we have a mayor, can the council overturn a mayor's decision? Yes, but it's by 4/5. I can't remember what they call it, but it's 4 out of the 5 would have to override the veto if it's a 5-member council. So yes, there is ability, but it takes more of a higher supermajority of the council, whether it's 5 or 6 or 7, to override the mayor. Great question. Scott Jacobs again, will a city council set policy or the mayor? If we don't elect the mayor council form and we go with just the city council form, the city council and the 5 elected representatives will set the policy. Herbert Davila, excellent question. Can the decision to change from 5 council to a mayor in the future happen? Yes. So as a city, that's an additional right we have. We can continue to change for our future and what's best. If you're out here when the county changed their form of government from 3 commissioners to a 5-member elected council, if we elect to go with a 5-member council without a mayor, there is opportunity in the future to petition and put on the ballot to only Lake Point residents to elect a mayor and go with a mayor council form. Let's see here. Okay, let me touch on some other information why we these are things I'm going to touch on information of things that have come up regarding questions we've had since the incorporation has been filed and they are going to the ballot. So if you have not seen the Facebook posts, one thing that is always a question: do municipalities pay higher taxes? This sheet is for reference only, but it's taken from the State of Utah Tax Commission. Currently, the unincorporated town of Vernon, Rush Valley, and the city of Grantsville City all pay a lower tax rate than us. That's a question that's come up frequently, that becoming a city, you have to pay more taxes. That will depend on our elected officials and what we want as a community. But for an example, we did put Grantsville City on here, that's a large city. They are paying a lower tax rate. And then smaller towns that don't have as many resources are still paying a lower tax rate and still getting all the services they need. Kathleen asks, what is the benefit of having districts versus non-districts? This is, I would say for me, if anyone else wants to jump on, districts allows a division of the areas equally by population and makes it so one particular area can't have all the people on the council. That's a benefit. So it'd be divided equally in the county or the city, and it makes it so the largest populated area of Lake Point can't have several people that potentially could be elected out of their district and have 3 or 2 on the 5-member council. The benefit of not having districts would be that we don't have to divide it up by population. We have more chance of getting people who desire to be on the council. And there could be a district that would have someone that might not want to run or might not get an official that wants to run. Some other pros and cons I've heard. Jonathan Gerard has raised several times his experiences regarding the Tooele County Council, where once they went to districts, now everything that we talk to regarding our council member always goes back to one council member. It is not going through the other 4 council members. That's what has been identified to me as a con of having districts. You don't have access to all 5 people that are in your town representing you. those are the ones I have now, but let me read here. Herbert de Villa, selecting a 5 council will ensure that everyone has a representative from all areas. If we decide to go with the district, all residents from older areas to newer areas have representatives. That would be a pro, that every area is represented. Okay. Let me pull up. We're going to quickly talk about other issues that have come up really quick because I want to answer as many questions as we can for you guys. So this screen I'm currently sharing is a map of the area above the tracks that we were just discussing, BLM land and the Green Ravine Protected Conservation Area. So the Green Ravine starts over here and flows up here into BLM land. The white is private property owners, Kennecott and Chris Robinson. Hopefully that map gives a little more perspective of the area. Again, this is a protected area conservation easement that is BLM's the owner of the land, and the Utah Open Lands Group is the group that holds their conservation easement. We will say that if anyone wants a copy of that, we would be glad to give you that. Utah Open Lands has with the county with us present discussing the road. They're very concerned about the road that is proposed to go through there. So let me share that too.
That's already included in it.
So this has come up as part of the incorporation. Will our community have a say in this? I would say based on this proposed road being part of the what they call the Tooele Valley Transportation Committee, the 3 representatives are Grantsville City, Tooele City, and 1 county representative, the current council member, Tom Tripp. They are the group that is working on this and deciding. I would absolutely say that if we are a city, we would have a seat at that table, be able to protect our open space and maybe negotiate for some of the other alternatives. Why is that important? Because we're not on several boards. If you're not aware, there's several boards besides the Transportation Board, the Economic Development Board, even mosquito abatement. Mosquito abatement's here in Lake Point, but the representatives on the board are from the county, a Grantsville council member, a Tooele City council member. There's so many pros that come from having an elected city and having elected officials local that can represent us on boards that we're not eligible for without our own city representatives. Let me just pull up one more image here for you. Sorry, it just takes a sec to get all these images. Okay, the other board that we're not on, I just want to touch on boards real quick. The Tooele County Council of Governments. The Council of Governments meet and discuss all government planning and activity within Tooele County. The current members are all county mayors, any mayor within the county, the county council, the school district superintendent, the county engineer, and the county attorney. Another board that if we become a city, we would have a seat at the table representing Lake Point for any government planning and activity in Tooele County. The second board we mentioned is Economic Development Advisory Board. This one has 1 Tooele County representative, 3 municipality representatives from Tooele and Grantsville and Tooele County Council of Governments representing small townships. This board applies for grants, determines which projects get funded by grants, prepares the grant funding, and recommends ways to obtain the grants and distributes the grants. Another board that, not being a city, we don't have local representation from Lake Point residents on the board. Again, we already covered mosquito abatement. The current board members are 1 county representative. This current board is a Stockton city representative, a Grantsville city council representative. So those are the Oh, and the last one is the Tooele Valley Rural Planning Organization. Questions are constantly posed. Would we have more feedback and more say in what's going on around us and what's happening in our communities or near our communities? In regards to new development, absolutely. In regards to past that's already occurred, that's already going on, and that's development agreements that have already occurred. But new development, the membership of the Tooele Valley Rural Planning Organization is the Tooele City Mayor, the Grantsville City Mayor, and Commissioner Tom Tripp. So we'd have additional seat also at the table on rural planning for the Tooele Valley to try and voice what Lake Point thinks is best by them in their boundaries and things like that. Sorry, one last thing to cover. We're gonna cover roadways because it's important as we've discussed this. There is several options if you have not seen them for other roadways. And that's being brought up because someone has asked, what can we do about it, right? Well, if we have a seat at those tables on the transportation board, we have a seat at the table with the state. The Ochre Expressway, like I said, we all know and understand we need another road out of Lake Point, out of Tooele County, so it doesn't bottleneck, so it mitigates traffic impact in our town because we've seen it when everyone cuts through town. You know, we've seen every bit of that. But we do have options that have been proposed. Here's the original plan for the SR 201 extension to SR 36 outside of Tooele County. This was UDOT's original plan before the newest planning organization came up with 4 other ideas. As you can see, it does not go behind the foothills in our open space, our conservation area, our running paths, our horse riding paths, our jogging paths, whatever you want to call east of the tracks that is BLM land. This plan laid out a good plan to reroute and connect I-80 and 36 separately. And again, I'm sharing all these because these are questions that we've got since the incorporation vote and notice of election has occurred. We wanted to make sure everyone's aware of these. Here is, if you were not aware, the other options. Here's the option that involves that Ochre Expressway. It puts the road right behind the tracks, sandwiching Lake Point between I-80 36 and a brand new 4-lane highway that's proposed through the conservation easement. So there is these other alternatives that do not go up behind all our homes and everything. And we are also hoping, again, not hoping, but we would have a seat at the table as Lake Point City on this discussion and alternatives here and the impact it will have on our community, having Lake Point sandwiched between all these highways. In addition, discussions with UDOT revealed UDOT's original plans why they were west of Lake Point is because it made it more feasible to connect any I-80 and 201 connection to Mid-Valley Highway, SR 138 to Grantsville, and other roads. And although that's a decision that's many years away for any road, by becoming a city, we could then start to provide our feedback through our elected officials and through our community by having a seat at the table. One more document here regarding that. I want to jump back to the roads, or sorry, the boundaries, and then I'll look at questions again. So jumping back to the boundaries, as you can see, this is why property owners here signed in property. Also why we included this property in the boundary is to assure any roads coming through there, our community would have a voice, would have a say, and try to do all we can to work with them to mitigate impacts to our open space, to mitigate impacts to the recreational areas, the BLM land, wildlife, everything like that. Let me jump back to questions now.
Careful. Thank you. I didn't need those yet.
Okay, so let's see here. Scott Jacobs, you have a comment on economic development?
Yes. In addition to the need of just sitting on these boards, economic development, bringing businesses here is probably the biggest thing that the economic study tries to forecast, but it can't completely forecast. Most of the area that's zoned right next on the adjacent both sides of SR 36 are zoned commercial general or commercial industrial, something like that. Basically, that's where we attract businesses in. We need those businesses coming in within the city boundaries, because that's direct tax revenue that stays in the city, not to the county. And we need to stay at the table to make sure we're attracting the right kinds of businesses in. If we want, Jiffy Lubes, that's one thing. If we want strip malls, it's another thing. If we want the manufacturing or light industrial something, that's another thing. But we need to make sure over the next 5-10 years, we're attracting the kinds of businesses that give us the best use for what the citizens want and the best tax revenue.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate your feedback. As referenced, just for clarity, Scott Jacobs has dealt with this as a community member representing the Park District before and understands this stuff. And also he is on the Tooele County Planning Commission, who has seen the impact of having a seat at the table and really vocal. Scott Jacobs was able to secure us impact fees for the Park District that brought so far to this point $100,000 into our parks, which we had to do separately as a taxing district, which is a future of something Lake Point City could do, is get impact fees regarding growth and development. Based on what Scott was saying, I do want to share one document here. It's the zoning for Lake Point as it sits now. So all of the tannish brown area is all our residential area. It's zoned RR1, 1 acre minimum lot size. This is outside of any development agreement that changes that. This is the standard zoning for Bridal Walk, Lake Point Vistas, anywhere that's been built that's not under development agreement has an RR1 zoning. The commercial highway and commercial general area that Scott was referencing, as you can see, is all in the light blue and dark blue. All that area is areas we can attract that is within our boundaries, the right kind of commercial development, the right kind of businesses and everything to help provide additional revenues to the city. It'd be outside, and so that it's on 36 and further west, allowing us to continue to keep a semi-rural and a functional town that is different than what other people think. Jim has a question. Where are we going to get water for the new businesses we are trying to attract to our community? That is a good question all around. So the Lake Point Improvement District and Ochre Mountain Water Company are both outside utilities. The city government will not be responsible for those utilities. I say that because it's the responsibility of that water company and the improvement district to make sure that the utilities, the water, and everything we need are there. And the state of Utah is who oversees all the water rights and the water shares and the water allocation. It's an excellent question because there is a max build out that each area has. Tooele County has a max build out based on the water aquifer. Lake Point City in the future, or Lake Point Improvement District, has a max sewer capacity. There's a max water use capacity, which is being monitored with the Ochre Mountain Water Company. No wells are currently monitored other than the Ochre Mountain Water Company as a commercial well. And that water information has to be reported annually. That water is reported because of smart meters on everyone on the Ochre Mountain Water Company. And there's a lot of details that the water company will answer and show you about the water. But all those businesses, all those residents, any new growth or development will have to justify and provide for the water information. And they'll have to also establish that they have the capacity to support their commercial business. Most commercial actually buildings that don't house like manufacturing or industrial don't use a lot of water resources compared to industrial and manufacturing. But it's not to say that water won't be used, but that's an excellent question.
Ryan, you can also bring in business parks. I'm not suggesting a Silicon Slopes here in Lake Point, but you could do stuff you see up and down, occasionally little spots of I-15 and 215 where you just have little spots of business park, and those multi-tenant business units, could be dentist office or whatever, that go in though. Those are also very low use of water, but are another excellent example of businesses that revenue a local tax revenue.
Thank you. And a good example of that is over by Solberg's. It's just a small business park next to Solberg's, dentist office, few restaurants, bringing in tax revenue, but very low impact on water. I'm just making sure we've covered all the information. So I have covered everything that our group wanted to cover. Definitely open it up to more questions. I know a few of our members of our committee. Let me just quickly touch on that real quick. Our committee is comprised of a cross-town group. There are some that have been here only a few years, living on the farthest north end of Saddleback. There is longtime, lifetime residents of Lake Point, been here more than 40 years, that own 1 acre, that own 70 acres. There is every bit of our committees mixed and compromised of all parts of town so that we could make sure we covered every aspect of what the group wanted to accomplish. And this group wants to accomplish local representation, representing our rights, preserving why we all moved to Lake Point, why we all want to do what we want to do, have the say, have the seats at the table, so that it's not decided for us by an official that represents 15,000 people and we only have 3,000 that he has to talk to versus the 12,000 in our current district with the county. The ability to contract is also a big deal for us. As we all know, when we do contracting for a house item or a house project and everything, you don't just call one contractor and say, oh, that's good, that's the price I'll pay. We have the ability to reach out to multiple people to try and get the best prices on garbage services, on road services, on other functions that the city will have to operate, that we have the funds coming back to us for, and try and preserve, again, why we all moved to Lake Point as we continue to grow. A good statement that Jim pointed out, water shares absolutely belong to each individual owner. They cannot be taken by any water company. They cannot be taken by any development and everything. Each individual person owns either their water shares for a well or water rights, and or a share in the company such as Oak Mountain Water Company.
Can I make a comment to that, Ryan?
Yes, thank you.
One of the things I recall from the town hall meeting that was done at the county building back in November 2018, they had a representative from the state of Utah as well as USGS that commented about water. We are officially, as of like 2019 or 2020, we're now officially in what they call a red or reserve zone of the county. So regardless of what's happened in the past, nobody new can move their water shares into this county. So the water shares, into this portion of the county. So whatever shares are in this section of the county right now will stay here, but nobody can buy shares from somewhere else and move them in and just think they can use more water. They can only use the shares they own.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. Again, another question, will anyone lose their current water shares if we become incorporated? No. Those shares exist with your rights, with your property. The Oak Mountain people own their shares that are tied to their property, and they're actually shareholders within that water company that have a say on what's done with that water at their annual meeting, things like that. And again, I'll stress that from what I've seen and being privy to water statistics as we had to dig a well for the Lake Point Park, is that the water company is monitoring it very closely on Oak Mountain, and the state is very cautious about any new wells that don't have the water to support it. So they're monitoring that closely. And like I said, there is a max build out. Every area has a max build out for how many homes can be here, how many residents can be here, how many sewer lines can be connected for the current sewer ponds, and how much water can be used based on the aquifer. I'd really like to open it up to anyone else with any other questions, or if any of our committee would like to say anything on why they started this process, why they think they should vote for incorporation.
This is Herb Davila. I would just like to thank you all for providing us with this information. I've read through this report a couple of months ago, several months ago, and I like the way you presented it, and you gave us a lot of the insights that a lot of people had questions on. And I'd like to thank you and the committee for providing this to everybody and giving us an opportunity to understand what we're looking for and what we're voting on. So thank you for a job well done.
Thank you, Herbert. We appreciate it. And we will make sure for anyone that couldn't attend, we'll get this posted on social media and try and get more people watching it and additional information out.
Make another comment, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, had to unmute myself.
Yeah, this is Scott Jacobs again. Just to further provide how we would get to, as I see all these posters and boards in these 5-gallon Home Depot buckets. I agree, even though I've tried to learn everything I can about, things that affect our potential future municipality. One of the things we need to consider as we look at this, conversations have been brought up about cost, conversations have been brought up about control. With the control, with the ownership comes a lot of great responsibility.
Scott, you still there? I think we might have lost you, Scott. Hello? Okay, if he gets back on, we'll defer back to him. Jonathan, did you have something?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just so that you know, when we were last time around, the county was under commissioners before when we were doing the incorporation, and they were at large. So what that meant was that the three of them, we could have representation from each of them. What changed for me, the biggest thing here, is that we went to the county council where we were elected by districts, and we lost our voice where we only have one district, one county council district person. There's only 20% of the vote. So all my hopes of actually getting the county commissioners to potentially listen to us kind of faded away as I've started to have meetings with them, and they only wanted to refer us to our county council representative for our district. And the others didn't want to give us all the time of day. And so that's one of the big reasons why I'm supporting incorporation, is because we need to have a say in our future now. And I think it's a good thing. So thanks for all your hard work, Ryan.
Thank you. Okay, so a quick question came up. There is, let me see, go back to it here. Hold on a sec. Sorry, okay. Does the committee for incorporation see any cons? Do all committee members vote yes to incorporate after reading the report? So I would say yes, all our committee members, which we have a large committee, not just the sponsors, are voting yes to incorporate. We've had multiple meetings leading up to this point. We've evaluated the study on different angles. One of our committee members, Becky Hudson's a real estate agent. Dan Crawford from the Lake Point Community Association. All sorts of people, you know, like I said, large property owners, small property owners. We met with every single large property owner to make sure everyone had input so that we didn't do anything wrong or catch people off guard. Things like that. So yes, all our committee members are voting yes. At this point, I haven't heard any cons from our committee members. If I am wrong, they're welcome to jump in. The next question from Dan Crawford. There are always some risks in every situation. The pros he sees and he personally believes outweigh any cons. Worst case scenario is that if it doesn't work, we have options to disincorporate in a year or two if we don't like it. None of us, though, believe that's going to ever be necessary. The revenue is going to continue to go up because we've had more growth since the study finished. We've had more commercial out on 36. Question from iPhone. Has there been any consideration of joining with Stansbury Park for incorporation? Yes, we weighed that heavily. I'll give the 3 reasons why our group did not feel that was correct choice to make. One, with Urda City being a city now, that leaves Stansbury Park and Lake Point City, the 2 larger populous areas. Vernon's an incorporated town, Stockton's an incorporated city. It leaves very few areas that the county would have for any kind of their projects, any kind of their actions for, and not negative, not bad or good, but all things would fall the Stansbury Park and Lake Point unincorporated areas because there it is a city. The reason why we considered it and didn't like it, there's several, but probably the primarily we felt that if we combine with Stansbury Park, we still lose our local voice. Again, like I said, Stansbury Park has over 13,000 residents. Lake Point only has 2,599. Boundaries or at large vote could result in the majority of Stansbury Park, as it is now, our representative for the counties from Stansbury Park would be elected from those areas, and we still wouldn't have our say, our local feet at the board and table, our seat at the table. Number 2 on that is there can only be one planning commission by state law. So the groups that decide development, decide commercial, decide all that, and then approve these things, there can only be one per municipality or per county. So that would be only one. They couldn't make one just for Lake Point, for Lake Point's desires of planning or zoning. They'd have to make just one, and it'd be representing the whole area. There couldn't be sanctioned zones. Back to the population thing is that with that population, it'd be the same thing. We felt it'd be the same thing as replacing the county government. We'd just be switching the county government elected officials for a Stansbury and Lake Point mega city as elected officials. It would just be a replacement of what's already going to be in place if we don't incorporate, because Urda City is already a city. So I hope I answered that question good. So the rest of it says, seems like there'd be a greater representation and larger overall tax base joining with the community. Our committee felt that there would be greater and better representation, having it be only Lake Point residents and only the Lake Point boundary. And the overall tax base, Stansbury is composed mostly of property tax base. They also voted for incorporation in 2016, and it required a tax increase also in their corporation, and theirs was voted down by thousands of residents. We also saw the best chance to become incorporated and represent our own city by voting with only our boundaries and our city members, and not having the tax burden of basing everything off personal property taxes. Lake Point has a large area for commercial tax base already existing, a large future area of tax base already existing. Additional question on that same person. What are the plans for fire protection? That actually already exists. We all pay to it. It's not going away. It's not changing. That'll be here whether we're unincorporated or whether we're a city. The fire protection is the North Twilla Fire District. It will exist when we're a city, and it will be our fire protection or it'll exist as we're unincorporated and still be our fire protection. Let's go to the next question here. So the last study for the question by Jonathan Gerard. Everyone that studied the last incorporation attempt very extensively knew that what the study projected didn't compare. It actually projected very low growth in Lake Point, and it had a higher tax revenue and a tax that would have been assessed on year 2 of that back then. Things have changed so drastically now with the growth and the tax base that it's the time to incorporate. It's the time to vote yes. That's an excellent question, though. There was more growth than projected. Revenue existed more than projected. More businesses have been added to 36 and other areas. More home businesses are existing, and more online sales and other revenues that we don't get. One other revenue that someone just texted me a question about was the hotel tax. You saw it wasn't included in the study. We have 2 hotels in Lake Point. Those hotel taxes go to the county and the cities. We would also get hotel room occupancy taxes. So I just want to cover other revenues that people have brought up that do exist that aren't included in the study that would be revenues for our city. One is the hotel occupancy tax. We have 2 hotels in the city currently. Any other questions? I think probably the biggest question I get from most residents that moved here with the small town feel, the rural residential, and the not wanting it to become like Salt Lake City, not wanting it to become like Taylorsville, not wanting it to become like these other cities. That is absolutely why we have to become a city and set this out right from the beginning. As new city officials, they will write our ordinances. They will lock in our zoning for our municipality. They will have seats at the table for the boards to attract the right kind of growth, right kind of development, and to negotiate for open space within any growth and development, to be able to push for, grant funds for more open space, more rural things. I can speak firsthand that the park district is working on a second park. We absolutely love the rural feel that we all moved here for as it continues to grow, as we add new neighbors, as we had lots of friends and acquaintances. It's been great. We're adding more assets and value to our community, but at the same time, having our local representatives, having the money that is being pumped into Lake Point with the growth, stay in Lake Point, and having seats at the table are some of the biggest pros we hear. But I can say that we will have opportunity to assure that animal owners aren't impacted by becoming a city by codifying in our ordinances. The county passed an ordinance that actually was adopted, that helped preserve some of the animal rights and really made it clear cut what animal rights exist in county areas, which as a city, we'd be able to write our own animal rights to preserve these areas of horse owners, like the families that do horse services, such as the Cunninghams and the Sharps, all the different groups in town. There's so many opportunities that we can do as a city. It definitely, like Dan Crawford said, it outweighs the cons. And to preserve all 1 acre property, people won't have their 1 acres eliminated. But what I see as a value is on future growth and development is negotiating a mix of lot sizes within an area being developed, so that we have everyone that knows this is a semi-rural community. And if you hadn't seen it on the Facebook post, there is a Saddleback CCNR in the HOA that makes it clear that every member agrees that they're moving into a rural community with animals, smells, sights, sounds, everything, and then they're not supposed to complain. It's part of that HOA CCNR that would take 70% of the membership to change, which is a huge number. So
keep in mind too, Ryan, we can adopt that as an ordinance.
Yes.
As the city, not only into the land use, we can also deal with that with nuisance. And another thing on that is, you talked about we can write our own ordinances. I've observed and I've tried to.
Got you there. Hello? Scott, you still there? Let me see if Scott rejoins. Hopefully he can connect. One of the things he's been trying to do is change on the planning commission to get better ordinances to protect rights. Scott himself is a horse owner, a rural property owner here in town and everything. So we definitely could write ordinances and codify their protection of the rural field, protection of the rural homeowners that exist currently as we continue to grow. Jonathan Gerard asked a question, will the Zoom call be available for those who didn't have a chance to be live? Yes, we will get that posted as soon as this meeting ends. We're coming up 10 minutes left for our scheduled time. If anyone has any other questions, we'll continue to answer them. But hopefully Scott can rejoin because it was an excellent question. He has excellent feedback from being part of the Planning Commission and the roadblocks he's faced trying to secure changes. But like I said, he's a town resident just like us, an animal owner. We have a lot of good people in town that can do this right from the beginning. And that's what it really is. When you become a city, it's how you set up your city from the beginning that prevents it from being the Salt Lake Cities, the Taylorsvilles. It's how you set it up right from the beginning. And that's where we have to do it right from the beginning. And that's why we are all supporting Incorporation, because we see so many benefits to it in the way we can protect what we all love to move to Lake Point for. All right, we'll wait the last 10 minutes. And if anyone else has any other questions, we'll try to answer them. Any other comments?
Sorry, I cut out on you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. Bluetooth is great, but only when it works. So on the ordinances and how we plan our area and things like that, yeah, the city council members will spend time doing that. But the big thing is by taking control, we also take the responsibility of how we want to write those. We can either adopt all or portions or none of the county ordinances, but until we incorporate, more or less, we have to accept whatever the county has. Just keep in mind, some of the ordinances that the county has as the city are state law or state regulation. So you can't just wipe the slate and say they'll all go away. But to Ryan's point, he's done a great job moderating this. We can have the influence and the voice to put in and enact the things we want and feel that are important for the area. But there are some things we will have to accept based on what the state requires. And that'll be a future conversation that hopefully our council members will be very well versed on. But just be aware, we will be able to control most of the direction we're going. And that's probably the biggest point to pay attention to.
Thank you, Scott, for getting back on. So a question is, a post on Facebook said that even if you vote no for incorporation, do you still answer the next two questions on government form? Yes, that is our recommendation. And this is why. If you vote no on incorporation, but the majority votes yes, then the two forms of the other two questions matter, because if it is incorporated, then we want to know whether we're voting for a 5-member council, a 6-member council, 7-member council, mayor form, and if we want to elect by districts. I do know that our committee represents and agreed upon a recommended 5-member council, 5 equal council members, not a mayor or manager form, but that again is up to the popular vote of the public. The reason I personally don't like districts is the state law changed and it requires the sponsors to draw the districts. I don't think that's a fair path for a group that doesn't know what to do, but not that it won't be done. But that is one reason I don't like districts, but it is a vote of the public. And to give the rest of the process really quick as we close out here, after the vote, if we elect to become a city, then if we elect to do districts, there'll be a public hearing regarding boundaries and districts that have to be drawn within 65 days. That public hearing will be held by the sponsors, and the boundaries will be presented that have been drawn for public feedback and input regarding that. Then after that portion, whether it's districts or no districts, next year in June, we'll hold primaries for elected officials. And by next November, we'll elect our elected officials and our Lake Point representatives. And then January 1 of 2023 will become a city.
So Ryan, question for you and the sponsors. Are you going to do another Zoom meeting for those who maybe couldn't attend this one, or is this the last one? And if you are going to do next one, when will that be?
That's a great question. Excuse me. Yes, we did plan to do another one. We didn't have a date scheduled yet because we were trying to find out when the ballots were coming out in the voter information packet. So we're going to get that scheduled and plan that out by the end of this weekend and get it posted as fast as we can so we can do another one for anyone else that couldn't attend. I understand it was a large football game at Stansbury High School tonight, so we probably missed out on a lot of the region championships, senior night. A lot of our residents have kids going to the high school, so we will definitely make sure we have another meeting. If you get a ballot and you want to wait for that other meeting, you have neighbors that want to wait for that other meeting for more information, please let them know. We'll be holding another meeting. This one will also be posted, that we'll do all we can to get education out before someone does cast their vote. There's a comment regarding the pro side of districts is you have a representative for your specific area instead of all one area of Lake Point. That's correct. Okay. Well, thank you. We're winding down here. It's 8:45, our allotted time. We'll put up as many resources as we can onto the social media pages. We'll do all we can to get all the information out. We'll put this recording out there along with the original hearings that are already up there, but we'll make sure everyone has a link to the feasibility study to go read on their own. And we'll post a future meeting date as soon as we can. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for the excellent question. Kathleen asked a really good question. Yes, on the flyer that went and mailed out from the committee, there are numbers they can contact. There's also an email, incorporatelakepoint@gmail.com, and various other ways to contact any of the committee members. We also have several monitoring Facebook pages and answering questions as soon as they see them. Thank you, everyone. I really, again, am thankful. We hope that you all vote yes to incorporation, and we thank you for your time and your questions. Have a good night.